kitchen. There's variety. Halal Fire has a huge network where Muslims gather and have discussions online. And that's one key thing that we at Hewar tell clients is to go into the blogosphere and online and find where the Muslim consumers are already having discussions about halal food, halal fashion, Islamic finance, whatever it may be in the halal space and beyond that's valuable to the Muslim consumer. There are definitely places that you can find them and become a part of that conversation and lead a conversation, in fact. And specifically with the example of Safaa, we've had a huge amount of success in engaging with consumers online. Everyone knows, of course, social networking is a huge opportunity for brands to leverage, and that's something that we're doing to the best of our ability using Facebook as well as Twitter. Facebook is more focusing on the consumer, direct-to-consumer outreach, and that's a huge opportunity because now, with online media growing the way that it is, you no longer have to go through the news media to talk directly to consumers. Of course, that's still recommended for most things. We definitely want to utilize the media as much as possible, but it's a huge value to be able to talk directly to the Muslim consumers in real time as they're having conversations. As well as with Twitter, as you probably know, that often has a huge amount of influencers in any relevant subject matter category, in this case halal, from news media to organizations to just thought leaders in the Islamic community that influence the way others think, behave, and actually buy as well. So there's tremendous opportunity. I encourage any brand who is trying to reach the halal consumer to consider online, and not only consider it, but to in fact definitely hit hard in that area because it's a major missed opportunity if you're not utilizing it to the best of your ability. And then I wanted to talk about a few ways of how to actually have a conversation with Muslims. So having, whether it's a Facebook page or a blog or your own website or Twitter or whatever it may be, however you choose to tactically reach them in the online space, the type of content that you're providing has to be relevant. And in the online space specifically, as you know, Muslims share word of mouth much higher at a much higher rate than the average consumer perhaps does. So online is a gigantic opportunity to reach them so they can spread those messages virally. So we know from the research that we've done that in the online space, Muslims want to hear from halal brands tips. They want to hear insights. They want to hear relevant news beyond just brand-centric. So consumers, they're not going to have much of you're not going to have their attention very long if you're just talking about me, and my brand, and this is our products, and this is our promotions. Obviously, they want to know these things if they're important, but to be able to address them in a more holistic way so that you're providing news and insights that are relevant to the Ummah as a whole. And another major point, whether you're a Muslim-born brand or you're a mainstream brand, such as Nestle or Walmart or whoever it may be, that is selling halal products directly, or a retailer that sells them indirectly as well, we want to make sure that you're not alienating non-Muslim consumers, especially if you're a mainstream company, because obviously the non-Muslim consumers are very important to them. If you're a Muslim-only brand, it may or may not be quite as important. But, halal has a huge opportunity to go mainstream, especially capitalizing on consumers who are eco-conscious, more in the organic and the natural foods movement, specifically the food I'm referring to. So you wouldn't want to necessarily alienate those. So what we often advise our clients to do is to not be overtly religious in your marketing communications. And that's also part of American culture as well, including the Islamic community in the United States. We often don't want brands or anyone really being overtly religious. So instead of being overtly religious, so just like we say with a lot of marketing to women campaigns that I worked on, you can't paint everything pink and expect it to, be like, oh wow, it's pink, so I'm automatically drawn to it. That's not the case. Consumers are a little more sophisticated than that. So just the same, I wouldn't ever recommend that a mainstream brand put, some type of Islamic symbol on their packaging or in their marketing communications to think that they're going to win over the Muslim consumers quite that easily. That's not the case. So instead of being overtly religious, what we often recommend is that clients and brands will instead try to appeal to the Islamic traditions and cultures. And I'm of the mindset that that's not all that different from the American mainstream culture as well, focusing on family values around, with food, family time around the dinner table, these types of things. So that's just a few insights to keep in mind when and marketing to Muslim as well as non-Muslim consumers.
Thank you, Lisa. In fact, as we are speaking, we have a live Twitter feed of the event, of this very event.
I was trying to Twitter earlier, but I couldn't get a signal in here.
Well, we read your mind. So. Yes, and actually it shows the power, demonstrate the power and the immediacy of digital media and the role it can play both ways in promoting this concept or detracting from it. And it does represent an opportunity, perhaps just as everything else though, with a challenge built into the opportunity. So thank you, Lisa, for that informative presentation. Next we go to the third speaker, that is Amir Toft. Amir with Halal Advocate Group. Perhaps this group is the most well organized, and I have had the pleasure to speak with many members, as well as was presented with some studies that have did. They are very committed group that would really like to see Halal go mainstream, and Amir would be the third person speaking from this side of the looking glass. That is the consumer, people who are interacting with the consumer, people who are themselves advocates, before we go in the next two presentations to both people who are in the industry, can talk to us from the industry's point of view, but also from the point of view of someone who's involved in Halal certification and the Halal enterprise for over 30 years, and that is Dr. Chaudry. So Amir, without further ado, please, if you can enlighten us on your group and what you do from your perspective, and the challenges and opportunities that the Halal concept may face or have ahead at this time.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. To answer the question first on point, one of the great challenges of the halal industry is understanding exactly what halal is. And words can be bandied about and interpreted in many different ways and defined according to one's own motivations and exploited to one's own advantage. But at least now, there has been a great shift in the consumer paradigm, whereas in the past, whether it's among Muslims or non-Muslims, whereas in the past, customers were perhaps somewhat gullible as corporations grew and were trusting of what was placed before them, that what they're being told they're getting is actually what they're getting, and that it's good for them and salutary and beneficial for their lives. They eventually began to cotton on after a while that this wasn't always the case. After maybe the 75th facetious moniker for spam that people made up, such as suspiciously packed elementary material or something like that, people began to realize that this stuff isn't really what they're saying it is. Or when Americans began to realize that they're becoming fatter and they're being considered by many people to be ignorant and unsavvy, they began to demand more. And this is very much true of the Muslims as well. They began to demand better products and more responsibility, corporate responsibility in delivering what it is that they want. And as Brother Shahed, I've heard him speak before, and I recall one statement that he made very clearly is that something along the lines of, the consumer's boss, that the consumer, what the consumer says, especially in a time where things are driven by the consumer, you cannot ignore what the consumer wants. And therefore it is essential to understand the values and the perspective of the consumer that you are trying to reach. And the Muslim segment of the population is very unique in its value system. And so it is very important for everyone to understand what those values are. So I would say that the most important thing, and I think this can be fleshed out now and in the Q&A session, the most important thing is to educate ourselves far beyond where we are about what halal is, what the values of Muslims are, what the worldview of Muslims is. And this is both important by the consumers, by Muslims, because knowledge of Islam is not something born within a human being, even if one is a Muslim. Muslims themselves have to educate themselves about Islam and what they believe and what their values are, and what is lawful and what is not lawful, what is wholesome and what is not wholesome, who determines that, and so forth. And it is also very important that corporations understand these values of Muslims. The values of Muslims regarding the world is unique in that there is a strain of responsibility to the Creator in whatever they do. Now, some Muslims may apply this more rigorously in their lives than others, but it is very important to recognize that for Muslims, the matter of consumption, and that begins with food and drink, but extends to anything that they consume. Because the word used in the verse of the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nasu kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiban wa la tattabi'u khutuwat ash-shaytan, as I recited earlier at the beginning of the program. This word akal is not just what you eat. It is anything that you consume or that you enjoy. And so in the Quran, Allah in His revelation commands the believers to consume of all that is in the earth, as long as it is lawful, halal, and tayyib, wholesome, and that they not follow the footsteps of the devil by giving themselves or abandoning themselves to excess. Some people in the world, they define their value system on Epicureanism, where they do whatever feels good or tastes good, and they don't really consider anything beyond that. Others will define what they consume based on health and nutrition, so they will demand that. And we find that nowadays, it's, any store that turns away or laughs at somebody who comes in and nitpickingly asks about all the ingredients to see if they're all in line with their vegetarian nutritional principles, that restaurant or that company is basically casting itself toward disaster. And that's because vegetarians have made very clear that we want and we demand that you give to us something that is in line with our nutritional system. For Muslims, what they consume is a sacred matter, as is anything that is within their mundane lives. Everything Muslims do, regardless of how devout they are in their practice, Muslims, by and large, carry within them a general concept that they wish to do what pleases their Creator in the clothes that they wear, in the way that they interact with people, in the food that they eat, in everything that they do. So it is essential that companies realize that for Muslims, this is not just something that Muslims want so that they can, that's good for their bodies, but that's good for their health. This is something that for many, many Muslims is essential to who they are and to their connection with their Creator. So Muslims need to recognize this general principle, and then go beyond that to understand what halal is. And then you can get into all the ancillary matters of machine slaughter and all the research that the halal advocates, many of whom are here from Seattle and Chicago and San Francisco, they're doing extensive research. I'm more just the guy who is talking about the knowledge aspect of it, but they're doing all the legwork and the research to try to bring an understanding to slaughterhouses, corporations, distributors of what halal is, because a lot of them just don't know. It's not that they are willfully trying to fob off something that is not halal to the Muslims, they just don't necessarily know. So it is the job of both sides to work together and demand from each other what it doesn't have. Muslim consumers want something that's genuinely halal and that it can trust, and producers and corporations want to know exactly what halal is. And so it's the job of both sides to work together to bring a stronger knowledge of what exactly we're talking about, so that what we're saying aren't just a bunch of empty words that are not well defined. Otherwise, what happens nowadays is people get lost in the big corporate fray. But the reality is the consumer doesn't care about dollars and cents, the consumer doesn't care about bottom lines, the consumer just wants to know that what I'm getting is in line with my values. And so we need to ensure that that's what the consumer gets through education and knowledge.
Thank you so much, I am staring enviously at the stack of questions that we got from last session. That's probably Farah Ahmed's charm on you, and I'm not able to be as charming. I have far less, so I want to remind the people who are collecting the questions to bring them up here, and I'm reminding you also to feel free to ask questions about the challenges and opportunities afforded by Halal, this new concept to many. But not definitely to our next speaker, who has perhaps invested his entire life on this very concept, working on this issue of certification of products as halal, investigating ingredients and investigating the best way to ensure that consumers who care about this concept are in fact getting what they are asking for and getting a fair shake. And that is Dr. Munir Chaudry, so he will address us next.
To me, there are no challenges. Yes, there are difficulties, but I see only opportunities. We have diverse groups here. There are opportunities for Muslim businessmen to create more businesses, and there are opportunities for non-Muslim owned corporations to service us, to service our needs. We already heard there are some 30% of the young Muslims own their own businesses. There are more opportunities. I grew up, I was born in India, grew up in Pakistan, educated in Beirut and USA. Been living in Chicago for 30 years, and here I am in New Jersey, the first state which passed the Halal bill in 1999, 11 years ago. Since that time, at least 7 other states have passed the Halal bills. Do those halal bills mean anything to the average Muslim consumer? No, they do not. What about the other 42 states, the ones who don't have the halal laws on file? In this country, everything governed by consumer protection laws, and all 50 states have consumer protection laws, so everybody is covered under that. So don't give too much credence to the halal bills. It's up to the consumers to make sure what they need and their needs are met. That was my first point. My second point is be counted where it matters the most. We go to supermarkets, we go to grocery stores. We treat grocery stores as a supermarket, as libraries. We stand in the aisles, read labels for hours and hours before we buy anything. Oh, this has gelatin, put it down. This has Amanullah, glyceride, put it down. Would it be nice if certified products have the logos, somebody's logo, or just a halal marking, so it'd be easier for us to make those choices. Third point I want to make is we do not exist. We exist only in our own meetings, in our own minds. We keep increasing our numbers every year by 10–15%. Some is true, some probably not true, but that's not how industry works. And Brother Mehmood would agree with me on this. Every company has their own way of dealing with the consumers. Many of the companies I have worked with, they keep count of consumer complaints, requests, any communication from the consumers. When it gets to a certain number, it moves from customer service to the next department, be it quality control or marketing. Analysis is made. If more requests come in and they think they can make their products halal compliant, then the file moves on to the higher ups to make a decision whether we want to add that extra requirement to it. So it is important for every one of you, especially the younger people who have quick fingers and can run the computers and iPad faster, to email to the companies, to send faxes or just call. Almost every package has either 800 number on for consumers to call or have some number. So be confident. Fourth point I want to make is who is in control in the halal industry. At least in USA, the middleman has been in control, which is called the distributor. Distributors are the ones who reach out to the manufacturer. They are the ones who supply to the retailers, and most of the time they call the shots. Okay? Realize who they are and work with them to encourage them, and also work with the retailers so they buy from those reputable distributors. The distribution not only controlled by the distributors in USA, it's controlled throughout the world, except for a few countries who have very, very strict national halal regulations, and those are only 3 countries which come to mind. That's Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore, and if I may add 4th one, there would be Brunei. The rest of the countries, including my home country, Pakistan, do not have any halal law or any consumer laws where they could authenticate the products. We received an email from one of the countries that we saw this product company claims it's certified by your organization, and is that so? And tell us more about it. I said that particular product we never certified, we only certified non-meat products for that company. I go to the company that said, no, if we made any meat products halal in this country, I would be the first one to know. So they totally denied making any halal products. Second email came from the same country, from the distributor. Well, yes, company claimed they are not producing halal certified, but the products sold in this country are halal label. You go figure. Fifth point I want to make is they have been feeling our community only Muslims can own halal businesses. I think we have hurt ourselves with that thinking. I could spend the whole day on that discussion. We have heard some of the companies who wanted to serve us the right way by supplying us hand-slaughtered meat, and they have not been encouraged. The sixth point I want to make is what consumers want. We have had 2 focus groups, one this year, one 6 years ago, crafted it. Muslims are really looking for socially responsible products, greener, natural. They want to save their time, but at the same time, the products have to be rightly priced. By the way, 2 of the names mentioned today, the great companies, the Saffron Road and the Amir are certified by IFANCA. And if you want to know how and why Adnan selected IFANCA to be their certifier, he's in the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudry. We move on to our last but not least speaker, Dr. Mehmood Khan, to give us perhaps an insight from his vantage point. Again, we have heard from advocates for the consumers, for people who have developed products and developed interfaces that are now those who are interested in halal to be able to interact and to be able to get information, as well as be able to find out about halal. We heard now from someone who has been involved in the certification aspect of halal, and finally we hear from someone who is on the corporate side, who is responsible, as we mentioned earlier, for development, research and development, introducing new products in one of the few global companies, PepsiCo. And so, without further ado, Dr. Khan.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Let me just start by saying a few words about PepsiCo, simply because PepsiCo often is not fully understood given our breadth. And I'll put my comments in the context of two roles that I have at PepsiCo. One is the role that you mentioned, which is the Chief Scientific Officer. What very few people yet have realized is about a week ago I was appointed the CEO of all of our global nutrition brands. I don't know what the definition of higher ups is, but I certainly will welcome that dialogue in terms of understanding the processes and understanding how these decisions are made. But let me start. PepsiCo is often synonymous with one of our brands, Pepsi. What a lot of consumers often don't understand and are aware of is we have a very diverse portfolio. Other companies, some of which I'm directly responsible for now as CEO, include Quaker, Tropicana, Gatorade, Sabra. I can go on and on, but numerous and very diverse. And the point of mentioning this is, when you have a company that is as diverse as ours, and in the U.S. we are the largest food and beverage corporation in the U.S. doing business in the U.S., as well as the largest CPG company. When we think about halal, we're really thinking about a very diverse portfolio, very diverse consumers. Now, put yourself in my shoes. We have businesses in almost 200 countries. Okay? There are only 3 countries on the face of the earth where Pepsi doesn't have an operating business. As we think about that, of those 24 countries, we have halal certification. In fact, collaborating, as mentioned, with Dr. Chaudry. That's the easy part of the equation. Where we have Muslim populations, we have for many, many years and decades of experience of doing business in halal countries with halal products. I can assure you the challenge around defining halal is not unique to Muslims. If I was to ask you how to define natural or organic, I would actually get as heated a debate as I would get if I got a group of Muslim scholars together to define halal. And that is the reality of the issue today. So this is not something unique to Muslims, and it's not sort of the big bad corporation trying to tell people what the definition is. With a lot of science and capability and all the best intent in the world, even non-Muslims, for a lot longer in many ways, with interacting with corporations, have struggled. What is vegetarian, what is not? I give you a couple of questions I don't have the answers to, but I pose even more provocative questions. If the product has been processed halal, but was the animal fed halal or not? Does that constitute a halal product? Or, if you define halal as the broadest definition of your lifestyle, then if you use non-halal financing to do business, is your product that you produce continue to be constituted as halal? Now, if we start to raise those bars up, I can tell you that very soon many Muslim-owned companies will start to no longer fit, let alone multinationals. And so, while I'm not a scholar, the debate is important. My responsibility as chief scientist, but also now CEO, is to do the right thing by the consumer, by the company, by the shareholders, by the regulators, by the governments where we have license and permission to do business, and engage with all of that dialogue and actually execute not for one country, but every country we do business. And I can assure you, we have 200 countries, we probably have 200 different perspectives. I'm an endocrinologist. Most of my career I practiced medicine. We used to say, you ask 2 endocrinologists as a patient, you'll get 3 opinions. It's very much the case in this too. Now, what does the consumer want? Well, we know something about consumers. We have billions of consumers. Increasingly in the developed markets, consumers are asking for organic, natural, whole or close to whole, clean labels. They want a product that's good for them. One thing always comes across. I'd like not to compromise on price, and I definitely don't want to compromise on taste and indulgence. Now, that is where some of this now starts to get a very interesting dilemma when you're trying to do product development, product marketing, product positioning. Because what you're asking to do is, corporations have efficiencies of process, some of it by scale, some of it by global presence, but you're asking heterogeneity to offset that advantage of scale. And where do you draw the line? Is it at a national level? Is it at a regional level? Do you treat the Ummah as one? That's an easy part of the equation. So I'm just going to leave some of those questions as much to be provocative to stimulate the dialogue, because for the few of us that sit in the sort of roles that I do, it's a very different vantage point. Easy to sit in the driving seat or the passenger seat and have an opinion. I'm more interested in how do I execute this. I'm a Muslim. I think I'm probably the only Muslim in this role, certainly in the US. And yet, I don't have all the answers, and that's a Muslim with every intent and wanting to do the right thing. Let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, my prerogative as a moderator, or my advantage as a moderator, not to get to ask my own question, but perhaps to plug. And that is the fact that ISNA is a founding member of the American Halal Association, an association that started in 2006 and has had few founding members. Its very purpose is to be able to perhaps provide, first of all, it's a trade association to provide a place where those who are interested in halal and in promoting halal can go and basically find the strength and the support and find the organizational infrastructure that can help them. But also, as one of the founding members, ISNA, we also wanted to make sure that standards are developed and standards are there for this industry and this concept of halal, so we can make sure that at the very end, those on the receiving end of this, and those are the consumers, are truly receiving what they bargain for when they go for halal, and perhaps many of them pay premiums for halal. The good news is that we have plenty of time to go over the questions, and I do have a lot more questions now. And I hope and pray that it will be very, very informative to all of you. And the questions came in several categories. I'll try to manage them within the categories. Some are directly to one or of the speakers or another. Some are categorical, and we will try to address them in their categories. However, I have to mention that if we end this session, we are now able to answer everybody, as was mentioned earlier, that those questions will be directed at the participants of this panel, that the answers will be compiled and will be on AmericanMuslimConsumer.com blog for those who are interested. But I'm hopeful that we can address all of them. The first question that I would like to start with is a specific question to Dr. Khan. And it says that as an, by the way, whenever you have mentioned your name and your company, I will mention it. If I don't, that means you have not stated it on here. So it's not, I'm not playing favorites, it's just a matter of whether you mentioned it or not. Dr. Khan, as an R&D developer of a large global company, how can someone like me have influence on the corporation's mentality on marketing developing towards Muslims, or even just to invest in halal ingredients such as gelatin and other ingredients like that?
I'm not sure I quite understand the second part of that question, but let me see if I got it. The first part is easy. If you want to influence any organization, whether it's a corporation or otherwise, you have to engage with them. You have to communicate with them. You have to dialogue. You have to communicate. You basically say, this is my interest. And just as Dr. Chaudry mentioned, I mean, you can imagine, we were very active system into PepsiCo. The quality part of it actually reports all the way up to me anyway. And that would be the easiest part of this. Now, the more broad level, then I think it's the trade associations, the organizations that set the bar of the trade side, but also the regulatory organizations, right? Because we, like any business, do business within the defined regulations, laws, the societal norms. As you help shape those as consumers, that will shape the corporations. No business is doing business in isolation, so that's one thing. Now, the second is specific question around being, what I think somebody was getting at, should I invest in being a supplier? For a company of our size, we'd be more than happy to do business. We give you a number. We do $30 billion a year just purchasing. Be happy to include you in that family. But the first thing we're going to look for is quality and scale. Because the scale that we're asking for, often 99.99% of startups do not have anybody the capacity to engage. And the question is, how does the Muslim community bring together the sort of scale community? Now, at national levels, it happened with one caveat, and I think this is a real story. In a Muslim country last year, we were importing halal ingredients from a non-Muslim country from a Muslim supplier living in a non-Muslim country, doing business in a non-Muslim country. America is a non-Muslim country. Most suppliers in this room are Muslim suppliers in a non-Muslim country. That supplier was providing us with an ingredient. In that country where we were selling the product, the local population wanted to ban our product because we were importing from a non-Muslim country. The local blogs, this was the Muslim media. They're importing from a non-Muslim country, we do not believe it's halal. And yet the supplier was Muslim. So these, I'm just giving you examples of asking again, put yourself in my shoes and say, am I going to go to a Muslim country now as my sole supplier for that region? Or am I willing to take the risk and the wrath of the Muslim Ummah by going to a non-Muslim country where there are legitimate Muslim suppliers? These are real things that we as the Ummah must get into a conversation about.
If I may get the second part.
Well, let me give you a question that came to you that you can tag then on this answer as you answer your question, Dr. Chaudry. And the question is, you mentioned the Halal Act, I think in New Jersey, in your presentation, and of course we're aware of also several other Halal Acts that have passed. The question is, can you elaborate on that, and can you talk about the significance of that? And of course, Dr. Khan already alluded to the fact that regulation and government mandates can play an integral role, a back and forth role. So Dr. Chaudry, if you can answer that and then elaborate on the answer by Dr. Khan.
I'll take the second part of this question first. This is a very specific question, a unique question about gelatin. And this one example would show you how we can influence the markets. The question came from Malaysia, one of the nutritional supplement companies in California in '93, that they would like their nutritional supplements, the 2-piece gelatin capsules, to be halal certified. And that company reached out to their supplier of empty 2-piece capsule, which happened to be at that time capsule that later purchased by Pfizer, and they contracted us to source halal gelatin, and we went country to country, did not find any halal gelatin which would come from halal slaughtered animals. So we kept working on the project. Finally, we sourced bones in Muslim countries, brought them to Europe, made halal gelatin with it. Gelatin went to capsule in Indonesia, 2-piece capsule got made in Indonesia, brought to USA for filling, from USA was marketed into Malaysia. See how the complexity of sourcing the ingredients, but the point is it can be done if there is a will. Will starts with the information. You have to ask what you're looking for. It will be delivered by the industry. On the second part, I worked personally with New Jersey, Illinois, Michigan, and California laws, and they were not started by a popular movement. The idea was started by one or two people here in New Jersey. Assistant Attorney General happened to be a Muslim in 1999, and he said, you know, we don't have any protection. People are selling whatever they're selling, labeling it halal at their whim. And he was very instrumental in getting the halal law passed in New Jersey. And then after passing the law, it goes to the next level, how it's going to implement it. Okay. There was no budget for implementing it. The budget was what was already available under the Attorney General and Department of Agriculture. They wrote the procedures, tried to implement it. It became very difficult to implement on their own because they did not have clear understanding. They tried to put together a group of Muslims who would give them guidance. I think we are still stuck with that. We come from many different sides to handle the issue. Somebody wants the best it can be. Somebody said, you know, whatever is available is good, and everything in between. So there is no unified standard in one state. There is none in Illinois. There is none in other states. But those laws only are paper laws. Your protection, again, my emphasis on consumer protection laws which already exist. Attorney generals are supposed to implement those. Make a complaint. If you feel you're not satisfied with the storekeeper that he's selling 100% Safaa halal and he's buying it from the regular sources, you can make a complaint, and I think they would act on your complaints. You might have ended too long.
Thank you so much. Actually, of course, the laws, as you mentioned, are an important factor, and perhaps even without bills that are marked halal, just within the consumer protection array of laws, there's enough protection if Muslims were to be active. One of the perhaps things that can enable us to demand that more is the establishment of standards and accreditation boards to perhaps be able to establish what the standards, so if someone goes and complains and there's an enforcement, at least there's a standard for our government or relevant agencies to be able to go to. And I would like to announce or highlight the fact that ISNA is in the process of establishing an accreditation board for the halal industry in collaboration with many of the players in this regard, and we hope that will be one more step on making sure that when those laws are enacted, then they have teeth and there's standards actually that can be followed. The next set of questions are related to how can people. The first question is that how can people find out about halal products, and perhaps this is related to the Halal.com as well as perhaps Lisa can enlighten on that. How can people find out about halal products if they want to? How can they get educated on what is halal, what is not, what is being offered out there?
Well, that's actually a tricky question, even though the obvious answer from my perspective would be Safaa.com, but it's more than that. I think that the Muslim community in America is so spread out and is not concentrated in areas where physical word of mouth, for example, in the UK, would be much more of a medium than it would be in America. And in America, Muslims are really dependent on their mosque relationships, their word of mouth with their Muslim friends, over email, over social media, perhaps for the younger generation. And there's just not a lot of other venues. We've talked before here, as well as spoke last year, about the dearth of American Muslim media that can focus on this. And like Lisa said, it's actually been growing. We actually do have an increased number of sites, especially actually food-oriented sites, targeting the Muslim community. But blogging, for example, as a medium is declining everywhere, including the Muslim community. So that's actually becoming less of a source of information as it becomes more personalized, as it moves to Facebook and Twitter, where people are really communicating with their insular groups that they already know. So it's interestingly enough, I think it's getting a little bit harder. But what we need to do then is that we need to think like a Muslim consumer and ask ourselves that same question: how will people find out about my product? So, you know, we're trying to reach out and find those people in the middle, you know, needles and haystacks, really, to promote Safaa Road, for example. And it's a real challenge. And I think my mantra, as it's been for many years, is we need to reinforce the idea of a Muslim American media, regional media, national media, etc. Because these are the only places I think that people are going to gravitate to eventually. Right now, it's still a very tentative word of mouth, and that's not good enough for what we need to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just continue on that. So definitely word of mouth, which is to spread, you know, person to person as well as online, and the forums and Facebook and on Twitter, and also blogs are definitely on a downward slope in the Muslim community. Oftentimes there'll be a new blog, there'll be excitement about it, and then 6 months later it's dead. But for the most part, reaching people online, I think, is a very effective way to do that. Identifying influencers is very important. So who are the thought leaders in this category, and then trying to influence them to essentially become a quasi-brand evangelist or brand advocate on behalf of your brand is very useful. And then the second part of that question, to define what is halal, or to what degree is halal enough. That's something that I definitely think some organization or brand needs to take a leadership position in, especially as it comes to the non-Muslim consumer in the United States, because the term halal is not understood at all. I mean, you know that half the time Arab and Muslim get confused, so you can't expect everyone to know exactly what halal is just yet. But it is definitely something that I think once the general American non-Muslim public is aware of what halal is, that they even may be interested in it themselves from a lot of different viewpoints. But I think that's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Lisa. Trends is emerging in the questions, so I will group them so we can finish within time, and I'm aware that we have about 9 minutes left. I'm asked to finish the session at 12:30. We have a question for Amir, Toft. From your advocacy perspective, what are some of the steps of the actions that you would name that an average Muslim consumer who really cares about halal, cares about it because it is, you know, the command of Allah? What are some steps or actions they need to do to ensure that they are able to get to halal and they're able to fulfill this religious requirement?
That's very challenging because information is hard to sift through for the average Muslim. And I want to link this question to the previous one because I had some comments on that and I think they're related. As far the individual needs to do his or her best to understand from a sacred Sharia perspective what halal is, and understand that there are differences of opinion among scholars that vary slightly, but there is a general benchmark of what halal is. So there are more books being written, there are now more scholars available, there are now more scholars in America available to discuss these issues. But I think also on the other side, there needs to be a lot more coordination in among Muslim scholars and among the different sectors of the halal, I don't want to call it industry, but the halal world. That is the sector of scholars and those who work toward establishing standards, the media, and also the suppliers, the corporations as well, because it's within the interest of everyone, because if that is not done, then this information will lead to an extensive degree of what we might call halal gossip, which will be destructive to everyone. People will not have any idea what they're getting if it is halal. Even if they understand what halal is, they may not even know that what I have in front of me actually is. And that gossip will also be destructive to companies. Even just last night, as we were being picked up, several of us being brought from the airport, there was a discussion, several of us either live in Chicago or have lived in Chicago, about a particular restaurant, and it's like, well, I think that's halal, and actually it's not halal, because, I mean, and even about something that's a very well-known restaurant, and there's a lot of doubt raised in it, and if these are the experts, and not to denigrate their expertise, who have difficulty discerning whether that is actually halal or not, then that's the big problem. There was another restaurant that took a huge hit because there was some doubt raised about the halalness of its meat, and there was a slight problem, and that problem was easily correctable if that restaurant had a channel to go to determine, is this halal, if not, how do I rectify that, and so forth. What happened was, people didn't have channels of knowledge, so they just talked and talked and talked, and this restaurant took a major hit. It's sort of, I think it's recovered now, but that was a big blow for it, and now the restaurants get upset because they say, what are you guys doing? You're messing up our business. So it's very important that all these people get together, all these different, everyone has different expertise and different bases of knowledge, get together and share their knowledge and what they know. Everyone has something to learn. I don't know very much at all about the corporate side of it and dollars and cents. That's not my field. But if I am going to be involved as someone who has a piece of knowledge, I need to understand that, I need to understand what I have to offer. And so everyone who is gathered here today has to pool their knowledge in order to try to sift through the information and establish on every level what is true and what is not true, what is the gray area, and work from there.
Then quickly, 10 years ago, we used to get one lawsuit right a month when we started to be at 10 years ago from restaurants when we challenged their halal, when more readers would challenge their halal nature. And we've come at least a long way from then where they're not responding with lawsuits necessarily, but they are panicking and they are trying to figure out how do I perform.
Thank you. We have 6 more minutes left and 4 different sets of questions, not individual questions. So if we can limit an answer to about a minute and a half, so we can do that. We have a series of questions that are really kind of centered around the idea of, and one of them directed at Dr. Khan specifically, but I would like to merge them together. One says, what if a company brand caters to Muslims, but they also supports immoral causes? In this case, they mentioned apartheid, for example. Another person talked about being involved in industries where people will invest and cater in halal products, but they also are involved in products that are not appropriate for Muslims, such as alcohol. And that also is raised in the context of PepsiCo, promoting some products, including some people would argue soda, that kind of is not very healthy for people, yet it is involved in the halal industry. And while answering that, Dr. Khan, since I mentioned PepsiCo, and this question was directed to you, also there's another question related that basically talks about what does PepsiCo hopes to achieve and perhaps other multinationals in getting into the halal market. What is your thought, or what do you think PepsiCo's thoughts in that regard, and what did they learn from their involvement so far?
Let me take that. There are really 2 questions that I think you raised. One is, I think, already been touched on, which is really around the definition of halalness, and people in this room are far greater knowledge than I do. But in a similar context, I will give you an example of a question that was raised, because I don't have the answer to it. And if you go to Sharia banking and the banker doesn't believe in God, is that still Sharia banking? Okay? It fits every rule, but it just so happens the manager of the bank himself is an atheist. Is that bank still Sharia? So, there are many non-Muslims who are actually managing Sharia accounts. Does that make it Sharia? I don't have the answer to this, and this is exactly what I think, Brother Amir said very eloquently. We, the corporations, and me as a Muslim, as a non-scholar, are looking to the scholars to say, come together and give us an answer. So I don't have the answer, and I would say, don't expect the multinationals to give you that answer. We're the last people to do that. We don't have the credibility nor the knowledge. We would ask you to do that. I would like to echo exactly what Brother Amir said, which is come together across the disciplines of halalness, come up with an agreement, agree to it, and let's all follow it and improve it over time. You know, I teach at a number of business schools and medical schools, and one of the things I remind people is the Wright brothers didn't build a Boeing 747, but they got the plane off the ground. Let's get it off the ground. Well, we can improve it after that. That's what's missing, and then we'll rally around, and of course, it will get better over time. Okay, that's one thing. Now, coming back specifically to Pepsi, what do we hope to achieve? I don't want to do a formal poll, but I'll hazard a guess. If I said between Quaker, Tropicana, Naked, Frito-Lay, and Pepsi, how many people in this room have consumed one of our products? I would like to hazard a guess the vast majority. Okay? So what do we know about marketing to Muslim consumers? Well, you speak for yourself. It's not, in my mind, the question is not whether we market to Muslims, we already do. Whether you're in Muslim countries or not. What is our interest? First and foremost, of course, we're a business to do the right business, serve our consumers, and to sustain it and grow it. And to sustain it and grow it, we will grow because we're a good company. Not just because we're a profitable company, because when we think of profit, just go down to Wall Street, and you start to understand that those are not sustainable businesses. Sustainable businesses, ours have been around 100 years, and we continue to grow even through all of this. And it's because we want to understand the consumer. Muslims are an important, integral part of our consumers. If you go to the Middle East today, you go to Muslim countries, Pepsi pretty well is present ubiquitously in very, very significant shares of the market. In some Muslim countries, we have 90% market share of the businesses that we do business. What have we learned? Speak to the Muslim consumer as a consumer, with respect, understanding their needs, and deliver. I'll give one quick example. Quaker has a big business in Saudi Arabia for about 30 days a year. Ramadan. And it's not because we were selling a winter hot oatmeal cereal. It was understanding the Muslims need something to help them get through the fast. And Quaker Oats actually has a physiological basis for it. It was speaking to the Muslim in a manner that they understood and meeting their need. That's the key. And if we do that, then we'll continue to grow.
Thank you. The next set of questions regarding standards. One of them, for example, as a sample, says what can be done and implemented to protect consumers from widespread fraud in the retail and food service market. Another, how do we stop halal certifiers that are really not offering halal and that their standards are questionable. Another one, do we have any statistics on actually that's out of how many halal standards are there in the industry? How do they compete for each other? And that is, since I am anticipating Dr. Chaudry to take that, also there are specific questions to you regarding organic halal food. What is the kind of demand there for organic, specifically halal food?
Assalamu alaikum. Actually, there are 1.6 billion standards, halal standards. And even the people who are the knowledge workers don't come together when it comes to the standards. Every single country have their own standard. 57 countries together, which is called OIC, have also come up with a standard 2 years ago. They have not passed it yet because they have not conceptually agreed on it. There are 3 different camps within OIC. I wonder if that's going to be ever passed. The actual baseline standard was given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And halal is all inclusive. Haram is what's exclusive. We are told that such is haram, everything else is halal. And we have to go to our basic guidelines to practice our individual lives. In every single aspect of our faith and practice, we use different levels. and halal standard is no different. We would like to have the products which are all organic, made the old-fashioned basic way they will have been for centuries and centuries. But industry has developed too far from there. In this country, we are actually going back to the organic movement, and that organic movement is not going to be saying what we have known of organic or natural centuries ago. Just 2 weeks ago, the Organic Products Association tried to include stunning of animals before slaughter into the organic movement. And we said, when did stunning become organic? Stunning is something new which started in UK, when the animals are raised on clean feed. They are raised without stress. They are slaughtered without stunning. They are processed properly. Okay? How much of that product that Safaa mentioned earlier come to some agreement as far as to the standards are concerned in USA, create some baseline requirements, and move on from that point on.
Thank you so much. We come to the end of our session. Shahed, I caught up with you, and so we are at the end of our session. However, that meant also that there were a few questions at the end of that we could not get to. So I'm going to reiterate the fact that we are going to have those on the blogs, and that is AmericanMuslimConsumerBlog.com. And we hope that you will follow that and that you will be able to get your answers there. My thanks to our panel representing a broad array of individuals that represent companies that are at the heart of the Halal movement, and for their insights. And thank you for all of your questions, and we hope you will enjoy your lunch and the rest of this conference. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, Shahed and Lisa, your points about the interesting model of the work of Safaa, I think it's an incredible model that takes us in the industry to the next level. And we look forward to more of that, and inshallah hearing great things about that as well. Brother Amir, you raised a very important